Good evening and welcome to RTD's English News Edition, the top stories. Inspection to an Abok military border by a strong ministerial delegation. And on the international news, US President Donald Trump declares he will allow the release of classified documents on JF Kennedy assassination. Those are the top stories. Thanks for joining us in our newsroom. A ministerial delegation led by the Minister of Defense responsible for relations with Parliament visited the Abok region yesterday. In addition to the Minister of Defense, this delegation also included the Minister of Housing and Urbanism, Musa Mohammed Ahmed, the Minister Delegate in charge of decentralization, Hamidou Mohammed Aramis, and the Secretary of State for Youth and Sports, Hassan Mohammed Kamil. Senior officers of the High Military Command accompanied this delegation, and including among others General Zakaria Sheikh Ibrahim, Chief of General Staff of the Army Forces, General Tahir Muhammad Ali, Chief of Defense Staff, and as well as many officers. The Minister of Defense, Ali Hassan Badon, was determined to visit the posts and barracks of the Djiboutian Army Forces of this region located in the north of the country. The delegation first visited the military posts of Muluhle and Alail Dada. The movement was done by air. Arriving at Muluhle, the delegation was greeted by the Abok Regiment Corps Chief in charge of Dumaira Zone, Lieutenant Colonel Aden Douale Warsama. The delegation then traveled by road to Alail Dada, where they were able to inspect the local military post, talk with the military monitoring the area, but also discuss with the local sub-prefect and the local authorities. The ministerial delegation listened to the grievances of the people. Government members then urged the military and the public to work hand in hand to secure the area. It should be noted that the sub-prefect of Alail Dada will soon have a building under construction, and the minister delegate for decentralization has seen in first hand the progress of work and promised that this new building will be completed soon to allow the prefecture to get to work. The Secretary of State for Youth and Sports has handed over lots of footballs to the military post as well as to the local youth. Before returning to Muluhle, the delegation led by the Minister of Defense inspected units of Djiboutian Armed Forces placed in the front line to defend the front of Dumaira. Under the watchful eye of General Zakaria Sheikh Ibrahim and other officers of the National Army Staff, the Minister welcomed all the forces on the scene, including units of the National Gendarmerie and National Police Defense Forces. They congratulated the latter for their bravery and as well as to stand in these inhospitable places with difficult climate conditions to defend the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the country. The ministers finally managed to climb Mount Dumaira to shake the hands of the soldiers on site. Returning to Muluhle, which serves as the command of Dumaira Zone, the Minister of Defense and his delegation followed a briefing by the body chief on the situation prevailing in the area, particularly that of Dumaira. Since the withdrawal of the Qatari intervention forces from Dumaira, our army forces are facing the troops of Eritrea. During this information tour, the ministers were able to appreciate the challenges imposed on soldiers whose primary mission is to defend the national territory. It is quite natural that the Minister of Defense, Ali Hassan Badon, finally proceeded to the award of medals and decorated some soldiers who have distinguished themselves for their bravery to defend the country against any enemy attack. This long journey of the ministerial delegation ended in Abok, capital of the region, and there it went directly to the barracks into Army of Abok. The Rio and military honors were paid to him in the presence of the prefect of the region. This tour was closed by the Minister of Defense in charge of relations with Parliament, Mr. Ali Hassan Badon, who did not fail to write a few words of thanks and encouragement in the regional guest book. He and his counterpart of youth and sports also congratulated the military of this region who fulfilled their duty in spite of particularly hostile weather conditions. The fact-finding tour allowed policymakers to make a direct contact with the frontline military personnel, inquire about the basic needs. During its meetings with the population and the notabilities of the region, the ministerial delegation delivered the same message to all the citizens to stay united against the maneuvers of the enemy of the country. And now let me take you to Turkey, where the Minister of National Education and Vocational Training, Mustafa Mohammed Mahmoud, is in Istanbul, where there is an Africa-Turkey conference on Turkey's leading role in education. Turkey's universities, institutes and technical training centers want to attract more and more African students who have difficulties in registering in institutions in European countries. Yesterday, the Minister of National Education and Vocational Training, Mustafa Mohammed Mahmoud, had a long talk with his Turkish counterpart, Ismet Yilmaz, with whom he addressed various points of the Memorandum of Understanding signed between our two countries in February 2017 in Ankara. This agreement focuses on the development of technical and vocational education in the Republic of Djibouti, and through this agreement, Turkey has committed to equip the future training center of Balbala, which will specialize in the field of transport and logistics, and at the hotel center of Arta to the restoration and tourism. The training of our young graduates from the Industrial and Commercial High School and the exchange of expertise in the field of new information and telecommunication technologies were also discussed. A conference of education ministers from Turkey and African countries was held in Istanbul, Turkey. It was closed yesterday by Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim, who warmly thanked the African ministers for their participation in the conference and their contribution to the debate. He said in his closing message that it was now up to the Turkish Ministry of Education and the various cooperation and coordination organizations to work as quickly as possible to implement agreements with the African countries. Now let's get back to the national news. The Minister of Commerce was on his side in his Brussels as well. The Minister of Delegate for Trade, Mr. Hassan Ahmed Ibrahim, took part in the 20th Conference of the Ministers of Trade of the countries of Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific with the countries of the European Union. This conference took place from 18 to 19 October in Brussels, Belgium. The minister was accompanied by Omar Abdi Said, ambassador to the belligerent countries and the European Union, Mr. Ali Daoud Mohamed Abdou, Secretary General, Ministry of Trade, Mr. Mohammed Burhan Ali, First Councillor and Vice Councillor, and at the Embassy of Brussels. So this meeting helped to identify ways and means to strengthen the partnership between the ACP countries and the EU. And this session was chaired by Mr. Tedros, Ambassador of Zimbabwe, and so the participation of regional organizations, COMESA and IGAD. At the beginning of the session, the ministers were able to see and participate the results of the UNCTA report on strengthening into intra-ACP trade relations. The Minister Delegate in charge of decentralization, Hamadou Mohamed Aramis, received today the new Director of French Development Agency, Mr. Philippe Gagnon. The Minister began with a brief presentation of the Ministry and then focused the discussions on the objectives of his department, which has daunting tasks of reducing inequalities between the interior regions and the capital. The director of the AFD thanked the minister for his warm welcome and was impressed by the quality and depth of work that has been accomplished in such a short time. He also took the opportunity to present the fields of action of the AFD while stating that the priority of the agency remains the social sector. He pointed out, however, that decentralization is also social. The minister reminded the meeting of the president's desire to make decentralization one of the priorities of his mandate. Mr. Mohamed Harmouz and Mr. Philippe are committed to establishing a frank collaboration between them. Today, at the headquarters of the UNFT, is held the launch ceremony of the training on the development of handicrafts. This training will be held officially tomorrow at Kassav, and UNFT is an essential action for the empowerment of women and a drastic means of reducing gender inequality. It will be available to reputable international trainers in the field of craftsmanship, and the main objective is to help women artisans improve their skills to make them more attractive, more open, and above all, more lucrative. It is also noted that these products have struggled to evolve and follow the expectations of Djiboutian customers. They have not been able to adapt to the competition of similar products, but are based on other more abundant materials. Under the high patronage of Hassan Mohamed Kamil, the State Secretary of Youth and Sports, took place this morning at the Kulit Stadium, a consultation workshop between young people on the one hand and young as well as on the Secretariat on the other hand. The event took place in addition to the Secretary of State in the presence of the senior officials of the Secretary of State for Youth and Sports, the Mayor of Djibouti, Mrs. Fatuma Osman, leaders of the commune of Boulas, and nearly 100 girls and women, boys from different neighborhoods of Boulas. In their interventions, the young people raised several pertinent questions within the framework of socio-economic and cultural development of the nation. Young people showing patriotism and the eternal love of the nation, the later made proposals and made reflections rich with the inspiration favorable to the emergence of new mentalities conducive to the impulse of innovative dynamic innovation. The mayor welcomed the holding of such workshop and thanked the department for its constant concern for young people, and the Secretary of State for Youth and Sports was enthusiastic about the sincerity of the momentum of the movement of Djiboutian patriotism founded by Abdurrahman Hassan Ibrahim. The State Secretary of Youth and Sports sponsored the launch of the Djiboutian Table Tennis Federation 2017-2018 First Division, Second Division and Third Division at the Goulet Stadium. The event was held in the Goulet Stadium Grand Hall in the presence of the Secretary General of the Department and distinguished host of the President of the Somali Federation of Table Tennis, official of the Federation as well. All officials on site observed a minute of silence in memory of the victims of the cowardly criminal attack in Mogadishu recently. The President of the FDTT welcomed the continuing support of the Secretary of State for Youth and Sports for this discipline, which is starting to take off. In the afternoon of Friday, October 20th, the Rastika commune organized a gala match in two different disciplines, namely handball for girls' side and basketball for boys. It is the president of the commune of Rastika who officially launched the matches who will oppose on the one hand the women's handball team and on the other hand the men's basketball team. The matches were contested at the outlet field, which was recently renovated by the Rastika commune with the contribution of the FAS regional. L'Escale of Obok welcomed yesterday Friday, October 19, 2017, the open day of swimming. More than 50 people came to discover the last word in the world of this swimming, as well as Obokans the opportunity to take a deep participate in the water play and attend the North Derby of swimming. The day is masterfully organized by the Deputy Regional Director in the Obok Regional Swimming League. It was a day of hope for the swimmers qualifying competition for the Regional Swimming League. Despite the period of work, the league is in full swing to host and organize cohesive activities. Nothing like a collective sport to the promotion. And this regional meeting has kept all its promises with rather encouraging results for the Obok team, composed with many young swimmers. And now moving on to the international news. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has secured a strong mandate for his hotline against North Korea and room to push for revision of the country's pacifist constitution after his party crushed anti-state opposition parties in Sunday's general election. Abe's Liberal Democratic Party (LDP) and his junior coalition partner Komelto were on course to win 311 seats, keeping its two-thirds supermajority in the 465-member lowered house. An exit poll by TBS television showed, and some other broadcasters had the ruling bloc slightly below the two-thirds mark. The supermajority will allow Abe to propose changes to the constitution, which currently restricts its military to a defense rule. Most voters, however, oppose reform after a day that saw millions of voters brave driving rain and powerful winds brought on Tifan land. Abe's election appeared to have paid off after he called the vote more than a year earlier than scheduled. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will allow the release of classified documents relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, shot dead while visiting Dallas, Texas in 1963. The documents were due to be disclosed by the National Archives later this month. However, there were some media reports that Trump will not approve the publication of all the files. In a tweet sent early Saturday, Trump indicated he will allow the release subject to the receipt of further information. It is not clear what further information the president is referring to. In 1992, the U.S. President George W. Bush signed into law the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act, compelling the U.S. National Archives to publish documents surrounding the Kennedy's death within 25 years. However, there was a get-out clause in the act which stated public disclosure could be delayed if it threatens military defense, intelligence operations, law enforcement, or conduct of foreign relations. Well, that's all for tonight's news. Thank you for joining us in RTD and have a good night.